Welcome back on the AM show, and I'm not here alone. Let's welcome aboard Sweetie Abochi. She's back with us. Put it there.
Oh.
Fist bump. I got you there.
Yes, you got me.
The only one. So we're talking now about the air quality in Accra. Recently, Accra has notched the unfavorable reward, if you like, of being the world's worst air quality related city, outpacing cities notorious for pollution like Delhi and Beijing. Now, data gathered by IQ Air indicates a staggering air quality index, AQI, of 238, catapulting Accra to the top spot. Now, this, of course, is worrying. We ask, what does this mean for our health? What are the implications? Well, we'll be exploring those issues with our guests, starting with Venan Sondo. He is CSO and Principal, Shentafrique Academy, Project Director for Net Cycle. Mr. Sondo, good morning. Thank you for joining the conversation. Hello, sir. You would have to unmute for me, please.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining me together with Sweetie Abochi, my co-host. How did we get here in simple terms? The air quality, I know it is measured practically every day in different cities, and we know of Brazil and some cities there, how polluted, China, India, among others. But in recent years, we've been seeing Accra going to the very top, and here we are again. What accounts for this?
Well, it's certainly a combination of issues. I've not seen that report specifically, but I think it's clearly a combination of issues which has to do with road vehicle usage, emissions from indoor cooking, because 70% of the population uses firewood to cook, our untarred roads, and several other industry emissions. So it's a combination of issues, not just necessarily curbside emission from cars.
And we do know that, recently we hit as high as 371. Now, that is in the hazardous category. It basically means that the air you are breathing is significantly more polluted than those in other major cities around the globe. Around the same time we hit 371, New Delhi in India notes 190. Then you have Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, with 182. The next was Mumbai, India, with 173, and then Beijing, China, with 167. Now, this was just a few days ago, I think over the weekend. And mind you, the difference between Ghana, that is Accra, Ghana, and Delhi, India, 193.71. Sweetie, almost twice the number.
And it's also 57 times the WHO
acceptable
figure. So we are way past the deadline zone, and we're breathing in this air. I spoke with Joshua Samoa on Sunday, who's the lead meteorologist at the Ghana Meteo Center.
They say that is not in their purview, right?
No, they said they don't measure air.
Exactly.
And if anything can be done about it, it comes from governments with policies and, And then I'm thinking, so what's up with this emissions levy, and how does this play into the quality of air? Because you were just saying, Mr. Sondo, that it comes from the exhaust, fumes from exhaust, bad roads and all that. So at what point do we bridge the gap between these actions and government's action to ensure that the air that we breathe in this country is safe?
You said it's a combination of issues, and I think you're referring to micrograms per cubic meter, which is more like the uniform measurement of, I'm not sure whether that was PM 2.5 or PM 25, but I've not seen that report. I'll say
so what we're referring to,
that is very high.
What we're referring to, Mr. Sondo, is the PM 2.5.
Yeah, the
PM
fine
2.5, yes.
matter.
That is certainly very high compared to the fact that the WHO standard is 15 micrograms per cubic meter. But as I said, I've not seen the report, but what I would say is a combination of issues. If you look at Delhi and Beijing, for example, they seem to have much higher emission problems compared to Ghana. It may have been the time of the year with Harmattan and other things sort of which cumulate together and make it very high. But roadside emission is not the only cause of PM 2.5 emissions. I mentioned again that 70% of the population uses firewood to cook. And that is why you can see government actually being one of the first countries to sign the so-called internationally traded mitigation outcomes agreement with Switzerland, where Switzerland would invest in Ghana to actually produce and deploy more clean cook stoves so that more homes can have access to clean cooking technology. So it is more like you have to sort of put in place mechanisms that help the population to have access to cleaner technology. With the emissions, the carbon emissions levies for vehicles, it certainly helps, but then there's a school of thought that says this would certainly not prevent people from using their cars. In the end of the day, if that extra revenue helps the government implement some of their actions as stated in their nationally determined outcomes, then it probably goes a long way in the long term to help the government to deploy technology, higher LPG penetration as well, clean cook stoves, and maybe even incentives for particular vehicles so that people can actually acquire cleaner vehicles. Other countries have use other mechanisms. Look at Bogota, for example, in Colombia. What they did was, okay, we would electrify our bus fleets, would actually make more bicycle lanes so that more people can use bicycles to work and actually use buses to work, basically keeping their cars home, right? And those are sort of other mechanisms that help with the reduction of pollution from curbside emission in the long term. But then it's more like a step, whether it's in the right direction or not, but it certainly helps them in the long term to sort of accrue the sort of revenue they would need to deploy cleaner technology to curb the impact.
And you just made mention of some crucial points. So per this statistic and everything, we get to see the breakdown, what is causing this. So you look at the major sources of air pollution, at least related to our case in Accra, and you would know that road transport is one of the crucial areas. It contributes 39%, an estimate of Accra's PM 2.5 concentrations. That's from road transport. Then approximately 70%, of course, of daily commuters in Ghana use privately owned minibuses. We call them trotro. So a lot of them, a huge chunk of the problem, almost 40%, has to do with road transport, especially the trotros and others. They are very old. You can see the emissions, right? I mean, even if you're close by them. So that is the statistic. Then you get to industries and manufacturing in some parts of Accra, even if you're heading into the Tema enclave. They also contribute 11% in terms of the pollution. Then there is also automobile spraying and carpentry, also producing, quite a chunk. Then we have waste generation, and then the Harmattan contributing just about 5% of what we are facing. So these are some of the things coming together to create the problems that we see. But the good thing, if I might add, before Joshua Asamoah comes in, is that per this ranking, the AQI, it's going to be reducing. So last Sunday, I believe, is when we had the 370 plus. Yeah. It's going to be reducing to about 70 something by February the 10th, which is a Saturday. But how to maintain it or even reduce it is the problem.
Yeah. But we also have Joshua Asamoah, who's a forecaster at Ghana Meteo Agency, joining us. Joshua, welcome. We spoke on Sunday, and you mentioned that this is not something that can go away by our doing. But what I'm curious about this morning is that as of September last year, areas like Kaneshi, some major parts of Accra also experienced this. It recorded the same PM 2.5 levels, here. How come that we haven't done anything, or have you recommended anything to be done that's not being done yet? How are we still coming back to this issue?
Well, for us as a meteorological institution, what we can do is to warn of the meteorological situations that can compound these effects on air quality. And so when he was talking about how Harmattan affects it, this usually comes during the dry season. So what we can do as an institution is just give an indication of the quantum of dust that is expected into the country during the dry season and the possibility of it affecting the quality of the air, and expect that people take some precautionary measures to deal with it. I'm not sure we can do beyond that.
When you say people, you mean the ordinary citizens?
Yes, and then basically, so when the dust comes, you want to adapt to the conditions that it comes with. And so we'll be talking to the ordinary person in the country, but also in terms of policy, I'm not really sure if we're going to ask that they get air purifiers for homes in the country, or probably, well, maybe we can decide to find ways and means of dealing with the dust that comes during the dry season. But I've not really thought of how we can do that. I'm sure it's just the way that the individual can deal with the effects that the harmattan comes with.
Do you think that this emissions levy, controversial emissions levy, which some CSOs are calling for the withdrawal, will in any way help reduce this issue of polluting air pollution in Accra?
So I was telling you the last time that we only get this high concentration of PM 2.5 during the dry season, but throughout the year we have the concentration happening in Accra due to the transport, emission from industries, and all of those things. And so these are things that we would want to work to reduce or minimize, so that when the dust comes in during the dry season, the effects will not be as high as what we are seeing now. We are only seeing very high concentration of PM 2.5 in Accra, for instance, because the air is already polluted. The dust concentration in other parts of the country is actually higher than what we are seeing in Accra.
But like how high? How high is it?
So if you go to the northern portions of the country, visibility has been reduced to below 1 kilometer. But for us in Accra, we are getting around 2 kilometers and 3 kilometers. So that means the concentration in those areas are a bit higher compared to what we are seeing here. But then the PM and the quality of the air is poorer in Accra than these areas because of the already polluted atmosphere that we have here in Accra from transport, industries, and all those emissions, even burning of tires and all those things happening in Accra. And so if there's a way we can minimize that one, then we are in effect reducing the impacts that we'll have when the harmattan gets here. That's what we would be advocating for. But I'm not sure if we have gotten to the point where we can totally eliminate probably these cars, or probably move to electric vehicles to minimize it. But it's going to be a good way to reduce the pollutants that we have in the atmosphere.
You think that we have enough data or access to data to help us stay informed on the quality of air as and when we need to take precaution?
Quite significantly. Well, in some few years ago, we didn't have that kind of information to even tell of the quality of the air. In 2016, I recall very much that we had very high dust concentration that led to cancellation of flights, both domestically and then internationally. So the dust around that time in Accra was way higher than what we are seeing now. But because we had no information on the quality of the air, we couldn't report the air quality around that time. So we couldn't say that Accra was probably the dirtiest city in the whole of the world. But in the last years, we have information on air quality, and so we are able to speak to that data. So I can say that we've improved, and we can take decisions based on this data that we are now getting.
Were you the ones that first warned of this air pollution, this level of air pollution? Was it Ghana Met You?
What Ghana Met You
just on the back
was,
of you saying that you've improved, so I'm just curious.
So what Ghana Met You does is just warn of dust intrusion into the country. When we expect that there's going to be an intensification of the dusty situations, we warn and tell people that this has a possibility of reducing the quality of the air within certain parts of the country. So that's what we do. We actually did that somewhere in December when we sent out the advisory of the impending harmattan and its implication on the people within the country.
So in other words, Joshua, as far as you are concerned, you don't measure this. So you source out the information and you put out warnings, right?
Yes. So EPA measures the quality of the air. They have sensors in parts of Accra. And so what we do is use the information that EPA has on the air quality and also look at atmospheric conditions that are likely to compound these problems that we're having and warn people ahead of time on the quality of air that is expected maybe in the next 2 days, the next 1 week, or probably in the next 2 weeks.
Hold for me, Mr. Asamoah. I know you're really tight, pressed for time, but I'll come back to you briefly. Let me bring in Vanan Sondo. So we also know that about 28,000 Ghanaians lose their lives every year on the back of air pollution related. I know Agbublushi, back then, you remember the smelting, the turning of metals into this and that. It was referred to a specific portion. I don't like using the Sodom and Gomorrah bit. It was referred to as one of the most polluted places on planet Earth, and still that categorization continues. You look at that and the health concern this poses. I see a lot more people now using masks, not because of COVID-19, but because of the nature of the weather. Asthma, if you're asthmatic, it's going to be problematic around this time. Those who suffer from different, these seasonal fevers and all of that, the flu, it's not been easy. And then now we are also hit with meningitis, which today is the banner headline in the Daily Graphic. What do you make of all of it in terms of the health consequences, the health hazards this poses?
Funny enough, Ghana is one of the 15 countries in Africa with an air quality standard as a policy instrument. And funny enough, from that 28,000 you mentioned, according to the Clean Cooking Alliance, 16,000 of those related untimely deaths were associated to indoor clean cooking. So it's, as I said, it's not generally about air pollution, roadside population. The issue here is the other sort of factors that contribute towards an increase in those untimely casualties for members of the population. Certainly, using masks is sort of preventive. We have to look at in the long term because even if there's no harmattan, if there's no dry season, there's always going to be issues that lead to untimely death. And asthma has certainly become a huge issue, but asthma has always been there. But then you relate it to a temporary increase in air quality, a temporary reduction in air quality standard that is causing asthma? No. So I would generally say that it is a very complicated issue. But we can't really blame it on one particular thing. You have to look at a culmination of issues that are leading to that particular problem, and so it needs to be tackled from a holistic approach with respect to, of course, there's a drive to increase LPG access at the moment, and the measures, in the dry season, what could you do? You could literally water down some of the roads to suppress the dust on some of the roads, which is certainly a problem. And you can also relate to testing of cars. Most of the cars that are tested, whether they actually fit for purpose before they get on the road, that is another issue. But it is a combination of approaches which needs to be sort of implemented holistically to ensure that we actually addressing the problem gradually and systematically in the long term.
But these are wild fluctuations, right? I mean, we're projecting that by Saturday, the 10th, it would have come down to the 70s range. But if you look at that 70-something all the way to 373, that's from 73, 373. That's a difference of about 300 points in the AQI. So you spoke about Ghana being one of the 15 countries in Africa able to at least maintain some balance. But like you said, it's not always the harmattan. I've heard of previous years where we've gone pretty high. So what more do you feel we can do in that regard?
I think it's public awareness, more or less, early warning systems, cautioning schools about this, that they can open. It is very high. Schools can maybe stay at home. People can actually have the opportunity to work from home. Basically, as I said, dust suppression on some of our polluted sort of on tarred roads, and even industry stepping up. I mean, Joshua mentioned burning of tires. You have entities like Access Bank, which recently started an initiative to use car tires to produce sandals for impoverished communities. So it's more like small combination of issues, everybody playing their part, but then everybody needs to know what exactly needs to be done to actually contribute towards reducing the problem in the long term. It's a whole combination of issues, but most importantly is early warning systems for citizens so that they can be able to stay at home. They can really understand. You can say AQI, but some people say, what is AQI? Nobody understands what the air quality index is. So it's more like informing people about what AQI is. If the metro says this is higher than usual, then maybe stay at home or wear a mask if you have to sort of go to work, or literally if your sort of industry kind of tell your workers to stay at home, or maybe reduce production in the day, not sort of unusually increase air quality. Because Joshua also mentioned that it is because the city is already has an already lower air quality standard anyway. So any increment then actually sort of exacerbates the problem.
So given the hazardous level of this and you saying that early warning signs are the best way to handle these, I'm just curious to know, are there any collaborative efforts or initiatives between you and government, or do you intend to do anything to cover these areas?
Well, as an entity at Change Africa, we literally enable the circular economy, and we sort of deploy aspects that unlock access to sustainable choices. Air quality is not something that we do at the moment, but certainly at the level of clean cooking, where I happen to be the honorary executive financial secretary for the Clean Cooking Association of Ghana, we're certainly doing a lot in terms of assisting industry and manufacturers and kind of raising awareness about indoor air cooking, so that people can understand the consequences, have access to cleaner cooking technology, and then in the long term really understand the impact, not just to their health, but the wider implications to climate change, because PM 2.5 are certainly one of the clearly identified climate change causes. So we have to do a lot more to reduce the excessive use of firewood for cooking, which is obviously the world source of choice for cooking around Ghana.
All right, so to conclude the conversation, gentlemen, let's just walk through before we take your final comments, Mr. Samuel and Mr. Sondo. So how do you protect yourself? Some of what has been proffered, we have Mr. Sondo, who started talking about some of them. So one of those would be, for example, limiting outdoor activity and staying indoors as much as possible, especially, Sweetie, during peak pollution hours. So you know that the morning, when everybody is going to work, it's a peak hour.
Yeah.
Sometime during rush hour in the middle of the day, but usually morning and evening. So when people are going to and returning to work, lots of pollution. You would want to protect yourself as much as possible.
Close your windows, because that's how the air enters your room. And if you can afford it, get a purifier, an air purifier, because whatever you're breathing in, it's not safe.
Yeah, so the HEPA filters, those with HEPA filters tend to help. And the commonest one, you could use an N95 or a KN95 mask, which I've been seeing some people now use. It also helps filter some of the particles that would get in there. And I'm insisting N95 or KN95, not just any other mask, especially for schools. Openings, plugging holes around so that dust doesn't come in. And for some, they would merely say stay indoors as much as possible. And if you have those plants that, absorb some of these things, if you have them at home, this is where you benefit.
And it shouldn't be so hard, because we've experienced COVID. We were able to mask up, we stayed indoors, we protected ourselves. So basically, it's just repeating all the precautionary, measures that we engaged in during COVID, and doing the same things. Wash your hands, wear a mask, stay indoors if you can. Any final words from you, Mr. Sondo, before we wrap this up?
And of course, I know Mr. Samuel is still with us, so we'll take his final words as well.
For us, we sort of work in the rural communities with a project Net Cycle, where we sort of collect the waste fish nets from fishing communities. Some of them burn them, some of them burn their waste, and that is also sort of an increase in local air quality issues. To advise them not to burn their waste. It's certainly an issue that can be said around Accra, where there is rampant burning of waste, which also increases the problem. I think is we have a lot of policy instruments that we can use. We have you probably cannot talk about this without mentioning the increase in cars within Accra from Uber and Yango and Bolt, which has definitely increased the number of cars around Accra. During these times when there is out of this ardent increase in air quality, I mean, they could possibly sort of do some sort of incentives where if 2 or 3 people use a Bolt car and Uber car, then they have a kind of bonus. That will literally make more people, keep their cars at home or sort of use single Uber cars or Bolt cars or Yango cars around the city. Those are things that they could do to help contribute to the problem. Like if 2 or 3 people pull in a car, then they get sort of an incentive which kind of makes people sort of keep their cars at home or not use single Uber cars around. Those are some of the things that we would suggest generally. But of course, it's a huge concern. And if you have the opportunity to stay at home, use a mask or air purifiers, as you have said. But those who don't have the chance, use a mask or just stay home.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sondo. That's Venan Sondos, who's a CSO and Principal Shine Afrique Academy Project Director for NetCycle. Now, Joshua Samoa, any final words before we let you go?
Well, yes. We actually seeing a reduction in the dust concentration in the atmosphere. And so we expect that we'll be getting reduced concentration in the atmosphere, which will probably increase the quality of the air within the country. But that also comes with a bit of a challenge, because as the moisture comes from the ocean, the dust already in the atmosphere is going to accrete this moisture. That is also going to cause a very poor visibility in the early hours of the mornings, especially for places within the forest and mountainous parts of southern Ghana. And so if you are using the roads in the early hours within the Ashanti, the eastern, the western regions, parts of the central and greater Accra regions, you'd want to be very cautious. From midweek towards the weekend, we'll be seeing very poor visibility in the early hours. But during the daytime, visibility will be quite okay, and we'll be able to go about our normal activities. We'll probably get some 1 or 2 rainfall in southern Ghana towards the weekend, and that will bring a lot of the dust down, making the air quality a bit better.
Thank you so much, Joshua Samoa, who's a forecaster with GMED. So if you already have respiratory issues, please, this is a time for you to be particularly careful about how you go about, activities outdoors. But let's usher in the next conversation. Benjamin, yesterday, I saw that GLOSAG and some other labor unions had hoisted red flags on their premises because still on the issue of the 15% VAT. And even when we went to the Opera Square yesterday, people were saying that although Cabinet says it has, or it is reconsidering it, they haven't officially said they're scrapping it off. So the questions we are asking today is, has Cabinet actually scrapped the 15% VAT for above lifeline level consumers of electricity? And if and why President Akufo-Addo also sacked these MMDs days ago.
Yeah.
We are joined by government spokesperson
on governance and security, Paul Grip Wachidankwa. He'll be joining us for that conversation up next on the AM show. You don't want to go anywhere. You want to be right here. We'll be right back.